Well, let's get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Raj Shah, and I'll be moderating the webinar. Three quick housekeeping notes. If you can't see the agenda slide on your screen, you may have to adjust your settings in Zoom to make it full screen. Also, there's a Q&A question on the panel at the bottom. There's a Q&A button. We'd love to hear from you as we're going through the webinar. So if you have any questions or comments, just hop into the Q&A and type it in, and we'll try to address those questions and comments as we're going through the sections. And then we have a Q&A session at the end as well. So we'll try to address all the questions you have, or just comments or thoughts you have. So feel free to just have a dialogue with us. We've got several hundred people that are registered, so we won't be able to turn on the audios, but we will try to connect through digitally. The final point is we will have the recording of the webinar available to y'all by Monday. So just we'll send you an email once that's done with. So with that, the housekeeping notes out of the way, I'm really excited to have you all join us today. We have a really important discussion today, which is around making safety a competitive advantage. And I'm going to kick it off by just giving you a quick overview of Care Safely, and then we're going to hop in and talk about the safety challenge itself and what is that, and just three quick charts to just kind of set the context for the discussion we're going to have. And then we have a fabulous panel. I'm going to introduce all of them in a minute here. We're going to talk about four big topics around safety and making that a competitive advantage. One is making safety a strategic priority in the company, and how do we go about doing that culturally, organizationally, and things of that nature. So sort of a high-level discussion on strategic priority of safety. Then some lessons from other safety-first industries. Both Laura Lynn, myself, and Shar all have worked in other industries before we started working this one. And so we may be able to bring some perspectives, and many of you probably have as well, so we'd love to hear from you all as well. Then we'll talk a little bit about what organizations are doing across the industry in terms of investing in safety programs. And then finally, we'll talk about how to communicate the safety message more effectively, and what folks like Laura Lynn and Shar are doing from their perspective as well. So lots to talk about, lots of big, beefy issues to discuss. And we have a fabulous panel that's going to kind of help us with that journey, if you will. So with that, let me just introduce the panel. First, I'd like to introduce Shar Hugh. He is a man of many talents, I think. I almost think of him as the Elon Musk of our industry. He's the founder of Georgetown Living, which is a Alzheimer's facility here in Central Texas, just north of Austin. He also has a home health business. And he's actually a CEO of a high-tech startup in the senior care industry called the Helper Bees. And Shar, when we get into the conversation, I'd love for you, if you wouldn't mind spending a minute or two later on just talking through what Helper Bees does and how you thought about that business adjacent to some of the other work you've done. And Shar has I'm not even sure how to describe it, a PhD in molecular biophysics and computational biology. I'm not sure what that means, but it sounds really complicated. But thank you, Shar, for joining us. It's an amazing set of background experiences. So thanks for joining the panel. Laura Lynn, thank you for joining as well. Laura Lynn is the president of Amada, which is a home health agency. Her business is located in the Boston area. And she's been in the industry for quite a while, but what's interesting about Laura, in addition to that, Laura Lynn, is she was for many years at Fidelity Investments, which, as most of you know, it's a big financial institution. Laura Lynn, my personal 401ks are all at Fidelity, so thank you for keeping them safe. It strikes me that Laura Lynn, you may have some interesting ideas around, we talk about safety from a personal safety and infection safety and things like that, but Laura Lynn has probably a lot of experience from data safety and data security. So we may have her talk about some of that as well as her experience in senior care. Thank you, Laura Lynn, for joining us. And then finally, Kate Wallace. She's a colleague of mine here at Care Safely. Kate's got over a dozen years working in the front lines she's an LPN. She worked in long-term care facilities. And also a master's in healthcare leadership. So she brings a lot of the strategic thinking around leadership and experience, as well as that frontline experience to the table. She also leads all of our content development efforts as well. So Kate, thank you for joining us as well and giving us your perspective, especially as it relates to skilled nursing and nursing homes. So that's an amazing panel. I want to thank all of you panelists for joining us today. It's really, really great to have you all on board.
Thank you.
some of you may not know about Care Safely, so I thought I'd take just a minute, not a sales pitch, but just kind of a high level minute to kind of talk about who we are as a company. If you think about the senior care industry, you all have done amazing work and hard work around safety. But one of the things as an outsider coming in, we noticed that you all haven't had the tools and the processes and methodologies to really, the digital systems, if you will, to manage your safety, quality, and compliance programs. So what Care Safely has done is built that digital platform. And essentially the platform enables, if you're in safety, quality, or compliance, any aspect of that from a corporate level, regional level, or at the facility level to manage and track, manage all the risks, assess all the risks, track all the risks, manage your COVID response, do this in a much more efficient way without a lot of paper and email chasing, et cetera. And to identify all the high risk employees and departments and locations early before an incident happens, not after it happens. We'd love to have a conversation. Obviously, I'm going to go through all this, but we'd love to have a conversation with you all if you're interested in learning a little bit more about us. In many ways, if you think about if you have an EHR system for your patient records or a billing system for managing your billings and invoicing and accounting, in many ways, what we've done is that platform you need for safety, quality, and compliance. So let's talk about safety, the challenge of safety. And I'm not going to belabor the point on this, but if you just step back and just think about how we got here, where we're at today as an industry. As of December 31st, 125,000 seniors have died, 1 million have been infected, and it's impacted 29,000, almost 30,000 facilities. And it's not just a skilled nursing facility issue, right? It's a challenge across the entire industry. And about 40% of all the deaths have been linked to nursing homes themselves, skilled nursing. So it's a really, really big challenge. And as a result of that, consumer confidence and consumer trust has dropped dramatically. This is a survey that Qualtrics did back in August, which asked consumers of all different age groups, what's your confidence in safety at the senior care facilities and in home health organizations? And if you look at the numbers, they're pretty striking. For the silent generation, the folks that are 75 and older, 44% of them do not believe in the safety practice, trust the safety practices in the senior care organizations. These are the client base and the decision makers, right? Baby boomers, it's even worse. 50%, nearly 50% don't trust safety practices in senior care. Gen X, 42.5%. These are all the future clients of the business, of the industry, and or they're the kids of the folks that are in your facilities or getting home health services from y'all. So it's a really, really important thing to kind of just step back and realize consumer trust is everything. You may have the best amenities, the best food, the best activities, but none of those matters. The non-negotiable for everyone is the safety of their loved one. And this is a stark reminder that we've got a lot of work to do. This data is as of August, so my sense is this is probably the numbers are much worse now in January than they were back in August. So this is what we're trying to solve for, is how do we bring that trust back, and what do we need to do from safety point of view to make it currently a disadvantage and turn it back into an advantage itself. This distrust, of course, has had a business impact, and you can see that in the numbers. This is information from Moody's. Back at the end of Q3, the occupancy rates, vacancy rates have just shot up to 15%. And I just saw the numbers this morning from the NIC, and the numbers are continuing to deteriorate. And as the analyst said in this report that he wrote, unless fundamental changes are made in terms of safety protocols and processes, the properties will continue to deteriorate in terms of occupancy rates. So this is the challenge we face as an industry, and this is why we're having these kinds of important conversations with this type of a panel. So let's get on with it. I'm going to turn off all the slides and let's get on to some of these big questions. Shar and Laura Lynn, starting off with you, the two of you, just your reactions to these numbers I just mentioned in terms of consumer trust.
Well, you know, I'm not surprised. Obviously, these numbers are important, and certainly we watched folks who were having who were having home care, worry about how they were going to respond to COVID, and worrying about how we were going to respond to COVID. And as a result, there was certainly a level of mistrust with home care as well. And, I'm not surprised that these numbers certainly will continue to increase. But I think the most important thing is that the industry has recognizes that they have an issue with regards to trust. And I believe that there's a lot of opportunity that the very best of the best have taken advantage of and have started to turn the market around. And I certainly am seeing, a lot more positive things coming out of, what started out to be just a very devastating situation.
Yeah. Shar, your thoughts?
Yeah, so trust is an interesting thing in our industry. I definitely don't disagree with the stats. I think what happens though is when you're so we're a smaller dementia community, dementia only. We don't do traditional AL. We establish a bond. We're sort of boutique. We really meet with the families. We earn their trust. In our industry though, it's fluid, meaning you lose it quick. You lose it really quickly. You could take great care of a very difficult resident for a number of years. You have one fall that starts to happen, that starts to break it a little bit, and then you have another one a short amount of time afterwards. And if you didn't do your prep work beforehand, that could really sever that trust, which is ironic because given on all of our lines of work, everything's degenerative. Aging is degenerative, dementia is degenerative. So you will get worse. Is an eventuality of everything. When you get worse, I mean, Kate can probably speak this from a clinical perspective, things start to happen quickly. And so, we're fighting that losing battle. So what I found is, started my facilities in my late 20s, had no clue what I was doing, was just a research scientist, and I was just blown away. I'm like, I was actually quite hurt personally when we lost that trust, because it was just me in a 16-bed facility. And I realized I didn't do anything to fortify that trust over time. And that's not just having a good relationship when they come into the door and we talk about how great the activities are, et cetera. I needed to show my homework. I needed to show that, hey, we were getting smarter, we were getting better, and we were improving on a constant basis. So sort of fast forward now, sort of into my 11th, 12th year, we show our work, we show it constantly. And during the pandemic, it's become harder because we can't interact with them as much. So we've had to seek out different ways to showcase that, either through daily update emails or weekly update emails. Using new tools, constantly trying to innovate. These are things that when falls occur, when infections occur inevitably, we have a corpus of information that we can fall back on, and they now trust us. It's not just, hey, Shar, you're a good guy, I really enjoyed talking to you over the years. It's like, oh no, you know your stuff now, like you're actually improving. So
you're doing like constant messaging reinforcement around the things that you're doing on a regular basis, essentially, to continue to fortify the trust, I guess. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think competition is crazy. We're in Central Texas, a really dense area for communities. And so there's sort of the business aspect of it from a sales and retention and reducing churn. But it's also like, there's like an adage I think nurses used to have when I was being trained early on with my first nurse, which was essentially like, if you didn't document it, didn't happen. Like that's... We would just do things behind the scenes and it wouldn't be that showy. And so now some families do want to see that. So yeah, it's
Gotcha.
Elevating that level of communication, but it's not just about that individual. Like I find now folks want to know what we're doing as a community. Like what are we doing as a company? What are we doing as a facility for our employees, which is something a little newer, as well as for the residents.
Yeah, interesting. Kate, your thoughts from a skilled nursing front lines point of view in terms of some of the consumer distrust data, and what's your perspective?
Yes, certainly. So, being a nurse myself and working the floors for a long time and not that long ago, safety is so important and trust is so important for these families. I mean, they're constantly checking the CMS ratings to decide where they're going to send their family members to. And, if you don't have a high enough, starred rating, they're going to choose to go elsewhere. It's just that simple. And it's just that transparent coming from CMS. All these skilled facilities are rated different, obviously, from home health and from assisted livings. But there's also an issue of trust within your employee staff, being a clinician myself, when you're on the floors, especially, in crisis mode, your employees are your most valuable asset. And their trust is a very valuable commodity, especially during times of crisis. And, you know, with staffing shortages, with rotating staff, and staff working between multiple facilities, and other staff knowing that their peers are doing this, and not having, as Shar said, you know, great messaging coming from the top down, you lose trust in your employees. And that certainly is an issue. Something that I even saw personally when the pandemic first started. There was such an issue with getting proper staff in all these facilities. And I was in Massachusetts at the time, right outside of Boston, and DPH was sending emails to registered nurses, to LPNs, to aides, just to get staffing into various facilities that you had never even heard of or worked at before. So think about what that says to the people, that someone that's working next to you, to someone that's been sent there that they've never seen before. You know, it's crazy, but that's what happens with lack of preparedness. And with that goes lack of, sometimes, and a lot of times, especially in crisis, lack of trust. So that's my perspective, Raj.
Yeah, that's I want to jump in. I think on the staffing, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, we had with our we had a COVID outbreak. I think I had 30% of my caregiving staff quit within 5 days and you know, again, smaller communities. We have a couple communities. The average tenure of those individuals who quit was 27 months. So they were like people who've been with us for a little while. These weren't just new folks. I mean, they were scared out of their mind, and we were doing mass texting. You know, we've got a pretty good communication protocol, but I mean, we were running like our hair was on fire. So like we did not do objectively a great job of communicating to the staff sort of holistically about like this is the direction we're going. Frankly, we had no freaking clue where we were going. It was just sort of early on, and we were just running around. So I think Kate brings up a really interesting point of now after that, I mean, that it was incredibly difficult to weather that storm. Not going to happen again. Like we're bringing in staff to a lot of the whether you want to call it safety decisions, infectious control, like what we're doing, and what we're seeing now is just a lot more cohesiveness and a lot more trust in what we're doing, because we've brought them into that. We've brought them into like what the challenges we have with PPE, the challenges we have coordinating with the state and community and local governments, which has been sort of non-trivial.
You made them essentially partners in solving the issues rather than just
making them partners and letting them know that we actually care. Like the reason that we're doing these things is to help, and that we do have challenges. I think all too often we were just my admin team here was just burning and solving problems. We weren't communicating that outwardly, and then you know, lack of communication, especially during hard times, you're going to perceive the worst. That's human nature.
That's right. That's exactly right. No, it's Laurelyn, from a home health perspective, has this actually been positive for you all in terms of just folks not willing to, you know, go into assisted living? They're just choosing to stay at home and delaying the decisions. How has the COVID been for you from a business point of view, I guess?
Well, last year, you know, March, April, I was actually, I'll never forget, I was at lunch with a wealth manager and a geriatric care manager, and we were networking, and we knew that things were going south with, you know, with regards to COVID, but we never thought that, you know, literally the next day they would shut down Massachusetts, and it's been that way really since, to some degree. So initially, you know, for me, it was, I was thrown into a situation with a young team that had never been through anything dramatic as this. And so trying to maintain my composure at all times, you know, because everyone's looking at you, they're watching you, they want to know, you know, whatever you do, they're going to do. So, but in the meantime, you didn't know what to do. So really, at first, it was definitely thoughtfully sitting down and figuring out what messaging do I need to provide to my team so that it calms them down. Because at the end of the day, assisted living facilities, discharge planners, not so much rehab per se, but so many other facilities were having issues with caregivers, you know, to Char's point. And they were looking to me to help provide, because I have, you know, a pretty large organization, they were looking to me to help provide a solution. But I didn't even really know, and they weren't really forthcoming with what exactly they were going through. So I was going to potentially put my staff at risk. So I was very, very careful how I navigated all of this while communicating and really being a partner, but I was very careful about how I committed my resources. while also feverishly looking for PPE and everything else. Ultimately, over a 60-day period, exactly what Char was talking about, communication was number one. So, whatever my communication protocol was internally, now we're working remotely. My communication externally to the marketplace, to all the different constituents, and then watching different referral sources begin to leverage me in a way that I hadn't been leveraged before. I started to see scales tip in terms of where my business was coming from. And as a result, I was able to meet the demand ultimately, and my business grew by 60%. So we are, I would consider, we're in a very strong position now. We decided to limit how we cared for those with COVID, and that also accelerated trust with the caregivers. So we were very, very clear who we were caring for that had COVID and who wasn't. Again, communication. So it was really having an extremely comprehensive understanding your constituents, trying to think in terms of how they're thinking, and then trying to figure out how to service them in a way that maybe I hadn't done before, while quite frankly begging for PPE. We had the National Guard pull up in front of my building, and you wouldn't believe all the doctors and whatnot coming out going, "What is going on?" And I said, "Oh, it's just PPE," because I had made connections with various constituents that perhaps others didn't know about. There was a real lack of communication as to where to get PPE. So I am very happy to say that I am in a very strong position, but I have to maintain that position, and I have to be constantly aware of what's going on in the marketplace in order to adjust my messaging and how I approach the business.
Well, it's interesting that you took leadership and kind of saw where the trend was and you moved forward with it in a very strategic way, I guess. I wanted to kind of pull back on this conversation in terms of, as an industry, safety has always been important, right? It's never been a non-important issue. I was talking actually to a CEO of a very large, over 100 unit combination of assisted living and others. And what he said was, look, Raj, we business performance, operational excellence are sort of the two key strategic priorities that we have. And what COVID has made us realize is we need a third strategic priority around safety. Like, safety has got to be elevated to the same level as these other two priorities. How has your thinking as leaders, has it evolved or changed much, or is it primarily on communications, or has safety become much more of a top of mind issue as a leader of an organization?
It's funny because the marketplace as healthcare workers, so obviously I'm not from healthcare originally, so being in healthcare and the conversations that we would have amongst ourselves, that's one thing. But we are now having safety discussions with families. Families understand what PPE is. They understand how important hand washing is. So you're having conversations about safety in a way that you never had before. Internally, from a business the size of mine, everything that I was doing and continue to do is manual. So I have to now, and I'm obviously enjoy working with you folks, because at the end of the day, I'm looking for a scalable solution that can help me better manage and get in front of this, evaluating the risk in my business and being able to do it in a scalable fashion. Because at the end of the day, my business is remote. So all my caregivers are out in family homes. I have to be able to quickly evaluate, whether or not I'm in a position of risk or whether or not I'm in a position of strength. And I need to be able to do that more quickly than I did last year in order to maintain my, the level of care that I'm providing, and the level of quality that I'm providing, and the level of safety that I assure seniors. Because it's one thing to say that you're a safe organization and you can talk all day long about what protocols you have in place, but if you can't manage and measure it, you're going to end up with another issue at some point, and it's going to catch you. So I think 2021 is really, especially first quarter, as we all are turning the corner, hopefully, with regards to the vaccine, this is an opportunity for us to look at, how can we scale the safety measures that we needed to put in place last year.
So has it become sort of and I want to get to y'all, Shar, you and Kate as well, but as you think about, Laurelyn, about safety as a strategic priority, you're actually, how much more time are you thinking about? Has this become a more important in your mindset than it probably was, much more of a priority than before, or no?
I mean, it was always a priority before. I mean, risk
Yeah.
management and safety go hand in hand. So this is a business that is full of risk, and so you must be in front of it all times. And you've got to develop a culture and a DNA in your culture that's top to bottom. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to quickly and more quickly evaluate.
Yeah.
You do all the right
Real
things.
time.
You're
Yeah.
training and you're validating and you're supervising and all of that. But you need to be able to do it quickly, and you need to be able to evaluate where your risks and your holes are much quicker. Because at the end of the day, it's life or death right now with regards to this pandemic, and it's going to help shore us up in the long run.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, you were going to say something?
Yeah. I think she's well ahead of where we are. I think, Raj, what you were saying, I think the word safety, just the pure word safety, has started to enter my facilities director and admin lexicon more than it had ever before. Like, maybe we were terrible, but that was just not a word we would ever use. And Raj, even prepping for this webinar, I mean, you've got some anecdotes from sort of your past, from food and other industries where like y'all were really hyper focused on this. Just we just didn't have those same words. Now maybe we got to it in a different way, but I think so. One of the lasting vestiges of the pandemic is going to be the word safety, and I think safety encompasses a lot from staff health to infectious control. You asked like what is percentage of time? I've had to, relatively small community, repurpose one of our outreach, essentially one of our marketers, into purely internal facing, looking at safety, looking at compliance, because not only because you couldn't go out into the world and do traditional outreach, but because we had a huge need. And so just from the vocabulary change, I think is pretty stark where we're going to start thinking about it. I know OSHA had looked at more of maybe Kate's industry, skilled nursing facilities, as well as hospital work. But I felt like AL's private pay, we were sort of immune a little bit from that. And so I don't want to say I didn't pay attention to it. We definitely were focusing. We weren't creating a unsafe environment, but it wasn't as top of mind now. So your anecdote to open this particular section was, I think that's true. I think now that it is a third thing that we need to think about, and we need to have, Laura Lynn's been searching for a scalable solution because she has a disparate workforce. I always thought we didn't need a scalable solution, which is interesting given sort of my background now as a building software, but we absolutely do. I mean, safety now is a real-time initiative as opposed to something that sort of we have the luxury of doing monthly checks like fire drills.
Right. Kate, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, to go on what Char and Laura Lynn have said, I think skilled nursing facilities, absolutely, there's just greater complexities, sometimes even more so than in assisted livings and home health. There's an added level of folks with greater medical, worse medical conditions, chronic and comorbidities. They're in environments where there's, they don't have the luxury like Char may have, where folks are in their own rooms, in their own apartments. They're sharing rooms. You have 2 and 3 sometimes, residents, patients to a room. And because it's not private pay, there's a lack of government funding in a lot of these cases. So those are all other complexities that add to these safety concerns, obviously, and issues of trust that creep up in skilled nursing facilities. I think over time, certainly it's going to be really important from a strategic standpoint for it to come from the top down, all the way from the executive level down to directors, down to supervisors on the floor, that this is an everyday, as Char was saying, an everyday word that's talked about with a strategy in place, and an efficient strategy in place, and a scalable strategy in place. So in order to make these facilities as safe as families need them to be, as employees need them to be, and as these residents most importantly need them to be over time.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Let's shift and then a little bit, because I think it's interesting to talk about.
Raj, one quick comment I didn't think about until Kate was talking, which has happened twice now. So it's really insightful. It's around the staff. So I've really been focusing a lot on the residents, but it's like incoming staff. As what we have had to do is, not all of the incoming interviews, but they are talking about like our COVID procedures. They're talking about others because, obviously it's top of mind for a lot of individuals. But I start to see is through competitive pressures for hiring, which it's an insane market for us. We have to address it, and it might actually become a strength for us when it comes to recruitment. That's what we're finding. Like we're trying to find where we're putting that out, on job posting, but certainly on interviews. We're trying to recruit individuals by showing like sort of our commitment to safety. So not only churn of current employees, but bringing on new ones. And as others, it's a cold war. As other competitors around us start to take it seriously, like we're going to up our game. And it's sort of this constant thing, just like activities. I think you had mentioned it used to be who's got the coolest activities. I mean, hell, that's why we have longhorns on our facility, just to help with goats and donkeys. Like, it's like a fun thing, but and it works. But now for us, we have to start thinking about from that. It's not just paying another 50 cents. It's taking seriously from our policies and procedures, and sort of just from a recruitment perspective. I hadn't really thought about it, but it's definitely something that changed fairly quickly for us.
Well, let me pick up on this, and there's an interesting conversation around employees themselves, and let's shift this conversation to around other industries and what other industries have done in the past. I wanted to kind of share with the audience some, I came from the last 7 years or so, I was in the food industry working on safety and compliance. And if I can, I'll just spend a minute kind of giving you all a background on that. If you think about as consumers of food, obviously all of us are, 330 million of us, food safety is a big deal. E. coli, salmonella, foreign particles in our food, et cetera. And 15 plus years ago, safety was always important in the food industry, but with all the outbreaks that were happening with beef and cantaloupe and alfalfa sprouts, et cetera, safety became a much bigger issue. The government created the Food Safety Modernization Act. Walmart said, if you want to stock food in our shelves, you have to have really good safety. And the entire food industry shifted its focus from safety for the sake of compliance because the FDA or USDA is going to show up, to safety as a cultural thing. Like it was an important part of the entire culture. I remember talking to a client of mine, a big company, $1 billion food company. They had a salmonella outbreak and 22 people had died, consumers. They fundamentally changed their culture around safety, including, I'll never forget this, every single meeting that they have, no matter it's an internal meeting, a meeting with vendors like us, a meeting with outsiders, whatever meeting that they have, every meeting starts with a safety moment where they'll spend just 2 minutes talking about a safety tip. It could be at home, it could be at work, it could be in the drive to the work, whatever it was. And safety became a mantra for how they operate their facilities and their lives. And I think about, car making, think companies like Volvo and Honda around safety and things like that. So, other industries have had to deal with these issues, right? In terms of auto crashes, for example, over that 50-year period. And coming back to the employee issue that you guys are all bringing up and the importance of safety with them as well. I did some research, and I don't know if it'll shock you all or not, but employee injury rates in this industry are 2 times higher than construction work or coal mining. And this is all Bureau of Labor Statistic data. So it's just kind of interesting to see that, the other industries have reduced their injury rates about 80% with their employees, but we haven't made the same kind of progress in this industry as other industries have. And so I'm curious as to how the industry will look at how do we bring these other practices in that others have done, airline industry, manufacturing industry, other industries have done. So it's one of those things that not only impacts the patients and the residents and the clients, but also the employees themselves. And we need to keep that in mind. Laurelyn, I'd love to ask you from your background in financial services and Fidelity and all, when we think about data security, right? Data safety of our data, that's, my personal 401k data that's on your servers when you were there at Fidelity. How did a company like Fidelity or any financial services company think about data security at a strategic level? And what lessons do you have for our industry in terms of bringing those kinds of thinking, not necessarily the technical aspects, but the thinking over to our industry?
Well, it's interesting when starting around the early 2000s, mid 2000s, the financial services industry went through this huge integration evolution. And a lot of the systems, in some cases, in some parts of the country, in some parts of the world, there's still disparate systems. But there was a huge integration effort in order to streamline and speed up trade settlement and money movement and what have you. And then there was this onset of data security issues and password protections and encryption and whatnot. And of course, Fidelity is a very important member of the financial services industry, so they're a major league target. So the idea of risk management was always a big issue. So for those
Yeah.
like myself who's on the front lines, I managed the sales and relationship management group. You know, we were all licensed and we all were audited and we all had protocols and whatnot. And we were all aware of making sure that, you know, our desks were cleared and all the data that we may have had access to, we couldn't keep data on our local laptop. So there was a whole mindset around safety of your data.
Yeah.
But taking all of that, so you have all that going on in the financial services industry over the past, you know, 25 years. It's I don't think people really realize that the healthcare industry began hiring folks out of financial services for all
Interesting.
the knowledge that they had. In fact, I was actually talking to a healthcare company that was looking to integrate their healthcare systems, and I had background in that. So all of that experience in financial services and all of the integrity work that was going on to keep the data safe and to, you know, make the data free flow became very attractive to folks in healthcare. So
Yeah.
putting all of that risk management and all of that mindset into the healthcare business, for me, I think has been a bit of a competitive advantage because I come in with a different perspective around hiring and a different perspective around managing information and managing communication. And, you know, anytime there's a financial service crisis, the first thing I had to do was get on the phone calling my clients. So
Yeah.
through all of that, I sort of strapped all that back on and began just doing what I was trained to do, and that's communicate and protect. And I think that this industry needs to really embrace that as part of their day-to-day, you know, conversation, like you said, Raj, with regards to food service, that safety should be front of mind, top of mind, out
Yeah.
front, and really you can make it, I think, something that can be fun. You know, it can be something that is engaging, and it shouldn't be something that's just, you know, a piece of paper stuck on a wall in the lunchroom.
Right. Absolutely. That's really good insights. Sure. You know, you're a software entrepreneur now as well as managing actual facilities and all. As a software entrepreneur, just can you tell us, well, first of all, actually, just tell us a little bit about Helper Bees first, and then I'd love to get sort of what lessons have you learned in the tech world that you're applying to the senior care industry as it relates to prioritization of things like safety.
Sure. Yeah. So Helper Bees, we are a digitally enhanced home care option. We work with large long-term care insurance companies, so we're sort of the leader in home care provided directly through carriers. We do a whole host of things. We do nursing assessments. We have a social work care management component, as well as building quite a bit of software for some of the big long-term care insurers that people on the webinar undoubtedly have resonance with. And we do a lot of data analytics. So what we're trying to do is understand aging in America from the home through data, powering that through interventions. So it's interesting. It took a pandemic. So like cutting edge tech, we have, we do a lot of machine learning. We do data models. It's sort of my background slightly. But it took a pandemic to have that bleed over into this world. So where I sit now in the facilities where we don't use a lot of technology. We had an EMAR system that we built because I didn't like what was out there. It's a little buggy because we built it, but it works well, and it's geared to the UX was specifically designed. But that's it. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that I realized, actually, you helped me realize this, is on the software side, we have dashboards for everything. I get uptime on pages. If anything takes 20 seconds to load, that's a problem. So we have that. We have scorecards. We have metrics everywhere, constantly reporting. I would imagine 6 out of 10 conversations within the company is probably around a dashboard or a metric.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have that in the facilities in the sense of like we have paper, we go on intuition, we go on brute force, directors being on the floor, assistants directors being on the floor. We do, of course, have reporting that we do monthly and weekly, and we're going through all the paper like shift reports and nurses notes, but we don't have alert systems. We've got motion sensors. I'm talking about more of like internal operations. And so I think that's what made me realize is bleeding over from the tech sector. It's I need a dashboard that prevents me from being reactionary. And I think that's where this has really pushed me is I want a dashboard on everything now. We have an EMAR system, for instance, right? So now, great, dealing with paper, faster to train people, reduces med errors. But do I have a alerting system on sort of missed meds, missed time points? Can I correlate that with an actual individual caregiver who's administering that medication and retrain them? I don't, right? That's something that I do need.
Mm.
Similar to this. Like now I need to be able, I mean, we had to track PPE. Laurelyn was mentioning that. I had to track PPE. I got to track temperature. At one point, it was like twice a shift. Then it went down to one time a shift, and it was like residents or once. It was all over the place, and we could not react quickly enough with the
Yeah.
paper, and we were drowning in paper because we got surveyed, and we missed a couple signatures. Like literally a couple signatures out of however many, and a good dashboard and a good scorecard system, which the tech sector really beats into your head. But the input to that needs to be digitized then. And so that's another thing. Like now I want the convenience of other companies that I have, or of pulling up my cell phone or and being able to check into the status of the company. That's what I want for my facility. And now like I'm letting that bleed into everything from our safety protocols, infectious controls, to fall detections, to like all of those things. Some people on the call might be more advanced than us, but we didn't have those. And I
Mm.
thought it was something that we didn't need because we had an intuitive grasp of everything that was happening in the communities. But that wasn't accurate.
Yeah, so you're essentially wanting to go from after the fact reactive to ahead real time at least, and eventually ahead of the fact, not
At a minimum,
right.
real time. Yeah, at a minimum, real
Yeah.
time. I mean, the holy grail of any sort of tracking system is predictive analytics, right? So
Yeah.
you have to track it first, and so for us,
Then
it's at a
yeah.
minimum real time.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, we have a question from the from Lauren. Her question is, how are you all selling safety to your potential residents? So is Laura and Shar just sort of, and Kate as well, just in terms of how is what are y'all doing? And we're going to talk about this a little later, but let's get started with that now. But Laura, if you want to get it started, just sort of how are y'all doing that?
Um, well, I mean, you've got your, when we're in the sales evaluation point, we're talking about what our safety protocols are and what we do every day. And then, you follow up with documentation so that they remember what you said. But
Mhm.
a lot of it is, they want to show me, they want to see. So they're going to watch a caregiver come in, and they're going to want to make sure that caregiver is going right to the sink to wash their hands before they start a shift.
Oh,
So
right.
clients are smarter now than they ever have been around safety.
Gotcha.
And so
Yeah.
you are going to have to deliver what it is you're talking about. And so that's how we, so the supervision right now is very, has been stepped up. So our case managers are in people's homes more frequently, making sure that caregivers are doing what I say they're going to do around
Right.
safety. We measure, we actually go in and look for masks, do they have their masks on? And so things that I tell my clients we are going to do, I then have to make sure, because I'm dealing with a remote, workforce, I have to make sure we're doing it. Now, the one thing that I do talk about, to Shar's point, that I love technology. So we moved to a new platform so that caregivers could be screened in their cars before they go into a shift and ask certain questions that they have to validate before they get into their shift. That was something we didn't have back in June. So that's one small step. Clients really appreciate that. How are you going to make sure your caregivers are safe before they come in the house? They're not allowed to clock in if they have any symptoms, and they have to validate and attest
Right.
to any symptoms. So those are just some of the things that we do
Yeah,
to
that's
show
awesome.
clients
Yeah.
we're safe.
Yeah.
Hopefully that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really
No,
cool.
that's for us. Not to be too cute with it. We talk about it. So how do we sell it? We have to talk about it now, and we lead with it. Um, it it's it became it's a weird state of the world, as everyone here could probably say. Like a new resident now became a pretty significant risk for us. And so like we stopped admitting folks. We could have, but I just full on stopped. Might have been the wrong decision, but for us it just became a huge risk and a liability to us until we started realizing, we're doing the right things. We need to talk about it. When you talk about it with families, some other communities were a little, I think, slower to respond on some of the safety measures, but um, I think showcasing it just like we would on our activity programming, which
Yeah.
is stopped a little bit. Obviously, all external activities have stopped, but being open with potential residents and their families. The one good thing about it, I say good in quotes, is like everyone's dealing with this in their personal and private life, either through occupations or going to
Yeah.
the store, and so we get to commiserate on that. But what we need to do when it comes to the actual selling process of talking is showcasing ourselves as leaders and knowledgeable. So
And I think
it's,
transparency. So we
yeah,
have
it's
to,
like, hey, this is
that's something that I've
absolutely.
lived with my whole career is transparency. So,
Yeah.
every single thing that I've done in my career, I had to be able to communicate that outside my company. And so in this business that I'm in, I have seen it underscore time and time again that the more transparent I've been, even if I didn't know the answer, the more clients exhaled and said, okay, we're in this together. And I think
Yeah.
every conversation, as I tell my team, bad news is not like wine. It doesn't get better with age. So you want to get out in front of I've got a million of them. You want to get out in front of clients as soon as possible, even if it's hurt, even if it's not comfortable. Clients will always appreciate information because they feel as though you care when you're out in front. Don't be under your desk hoping for it to go away. So transparency and safety is going to be, to me, where we are in 2021. And those that do it, even if they haven't figured it out 100%, they're going to be in much better condition and shape. I will tell you, the number one complaint I have with anybody that complains to me about this industry is, I just don't know what my mother's doing. I just don't know how my father's doing. I just don't know what the heck they're doing. And I'm like, I assure you, everybody has nothing but your parents in, health in mind. The problem is these wonderful people aren't communicating. And as a result, it just continues to undermine. So safety has to be part of that conversation now.
Yeah, absolutely. Kate, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, so I agree. Transparency is absolutely key, especially in the skilled setting. These skilled settings, very different than assisted livings and very different than home health, are being limited at times with visitors because they just have so many residents. You can't have a ton of visitors in all the time. So, families that are concerned about what's going on with mom or dad, I can't necessarily stop by like they used to at any time of day, throughout the day, with grandkids, with whomever. So the transparency and the messaging, the communication between the facility and the families is paramount. And ensuring trust and safety right now, having clear, illustrating that there's clear protocols in place. The families need to be able to see these too. I mean, they need to see, they don't want to see piles of paper everywhere. And, as Shar said, because things get lost, and it's not an effective way to manage that or to message. Hospitals have moved towards electronic medical records, and families are familiar with that, right? They go to the doctor's office, they go to the hospital, they see that in place, and that makes them feel safer, that their data is being kept safe. Same thing at these nursing homes, when protocols aren't clear, there's not clear transparency, and they see piles of paper, that doesn't make them feel safe. So I think clear messaging is going to be key, especially in the skilled nursing sector.
Laurelyn, you were mentioning, it just struck a number for me. You were mentioning that you're doing more supervision of your employees, ensuring that the competencies are actually done in the homes themselves. I wanted to share with the audience some research that we had done in my last company around this whole notion of observations and staff competency observations. The research we did showed that if you just hired somebody and just put them on the floor, in our case, food processing floor, in your case, in the home, without any training, just, your experience, we're going to hire you, you're going to put you go out there and go serve a client. 68% was the compliance to the safety standard, 68. If you did really good training, onboarding training, that number went all the way up to 82%. And if you observed them and recorded it and did that 3 times over a 2-month period, that number then went to 94% compliance to that safety standard. So I was connecting to the conversation you were just having a few minutes ago about the notion of you're doing a lot more proactive competency checks of your employees to make sure that you're, walking the talk that you're talking about, right? They want to see that, and you want to see that as an executive as well. And so I just wanted to share that with the audience in terms of the impact observations can have. Because it's a conversation. It's not just an observation and recording it, but it's an opportunity to have a coaching conversation too. Hey, Jill, you did these 4 steps right for donning PPE, but these are the 2 things you missed. Let's talk about it now. Let's retrain now. So the next person you visit, not a month from now or a year from now when they do the annual competency test, we're going to fix it now. So I just wanted to connect on that front as well. So it's really, really interesting that y'all are doing that. So I guess it's sort of like the walking the talk, right? It's not just about the communication, but you actually have to make some changes in the behaviors and the training and things of that nature. So really, really interesting conversation. I want to shift to investments in safety programs in terms of what are the kinds of things that you all have been doing? Shar, start with you, just in terms of at Georgetown Living. What have you done in terms of additional safety, either training or PPEs? Just, I think, Kate, you were talking about some clients have done HVAC improvements in terms of air filtration systems, just all in the kinds of investments people are making. Just to have a quick round robin on that, it would be great. Shar, if you want to start
Sure.
with, and then Kate and then Laura.
Yeah. I read a little bit of the science. So we did humidifiers early on. Humidifiers, if everyone's now a scientist, viruses propagate easier through dry air. So we humidified the air, and I married that with HEPA 13 filters with UVC light. I put one in every single residence room as well as every common area. It serves as white noise, but they turn over the air 4 or 5 times an hour. What I did some research, everyone will know viruses will not be captured by HEPA 13, but the particles that are in will. And so who knows? I'm not sure if that helped. Definitely additional training. So actively seeking better infectious control, better training on hand washing techniques, those sorts of things. An insane amount spent on PPE, just an absolute insane amount of that. I think we're definitely not alone. I think everybody on this call has. And then looking at monitoring solutions. So I mentioned the paper. I think it was really eye-opening when we were surveyed, and we knew they had taken their temperature, but they hadn't documented it. If it documented it, it didn't happen. And we didn't have what Laura Lynn had with the app at the time of like preventing login. What I wanted to do is marry that with my time tracking system. And so actually this was when I sought out Raj. So shameless plug for him. But we were one of the first, I think, just to immediately integrate a solution. He did a 10-minute call with me. I'm like, yeah, we need this, and started connecting with our team, which because things were moving quickly, and we needed a better tracking system. So those were most of the things thus far.
Kate, from a skilled nursing, other things that on top of what Shar was talking about in terms of filtration systems, anything else that you're seeing or learning?
Lots of PPE, certainly.
Yeah.
But I think there's an interest now in technology that there never was before in the skilled nursing sector. But it's taking hold slowly. It's a new thing in crazy time. So, but I definitely see an interest. Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree with Kate and Shard. We've done all of that as well. So
yeah. I have a note from Michael. I'll just read it to you, and it's a really interesting question he's got. He says PPE restrictions on visitation, closed dining rooms, et cetera, that are prudent, necessary, and sometimes mandated by the state can be perceived as a negative or reflect poorly on the community when the competition doesn't have the same high standards. So how do we ensure that high standards are seen as our commitment to safety and not as a response to an ongoing problem? It's a really good question. Thank you for sending that to me.
I talk about this all day long. So I deal with the clientele that I have are high net worth and ultra high net worth clients. So I will talk to clients when they complain about the fact that they feel as though that some of these organizations are too restrictive. And I will talk about the numbers. So that's when your facts are really helpful. But, for those that have lockdowns and the amount of safety measures that are put in place that seem restrictive versus, the impact of COVID positive cases is significant. And so I think that, again, just managing that versus the competition, it speaks for itself. Now, obviously, if you're doing all of that and you have high COVID positive, that's another issue. But I personally have seen those programs work. And honestly, when at the end of the year, when COVID started to slow down for a little while just before the holidays, there was a huge outflow of residents living at home that had memory issues going to memory care. So, and now we're back to, I call it COVID 2.0. So now back to home care is spiking again because folks, want to have us come in. For a time, people saw that window. Okay, I'm going to move mom and dad into memory care because I feel that no matter their programs, even if they're restrictive, they're still going to keep mom and dad safe.
Yeah, fair enough. Another question. What kind of clean air stories are being told to existing and prospective residents in ALFs, assisted living facilities, display a proactive preventative measure against COVID. Clean air stories? No.
I think what this is saying is, I'll answer both questions sort of within one, but I think it's, for us, we have to be cautious. I mentioned we had an outbreak, and we were X number of months away from that. We had to be. I took the decision to be really cautious with like celebrating that too much, because with my luck, also with just basic math, tomorrow will be different. Like, the probability is
Yeah.
significant with an explosion of cases. So if you celebrate it too much as an endpoint, then it's liable to bite you. And so
Yeah,
I
that's
wonder
true.
if the clean air stories are around, like successes. So instead, what I was thinking, what we've done is treat it as a continuum in a journey. So this the safety journey or infectious control journey. Like today, we're doing great, and outlining some of the successes that we continue to implement, which is sort of one of the questions around. I live this around competition, where some of the competition, you go to the social page, mask staff aren't wearing masks, which is blows me away. They're interacting
Yeah.
with residents and families, everything. They're big congregations of groups. I'm like, how do they get away with it? I think what we've done, and sort of the answer, Michael, I take the long
Yeah.
game approach to this.
Yeah.
If that resonates with them, the no mask approach and everything, they are going to be risky, and they're going to bring it into my community, and now I lose more than
Oh,
one
you don't
person
want them.
because of
Oh,
it.
that's interesting. Yeah,
I don't
that's
want them.
right.
Yeah, so we don't want them. Like, if what we're doing, and it
Yeah.
hits me here, is like, how does it seem? His comment was the commitment to safety not be perceived as a problem. We turn into a strength. We are committed to safety. We're not going to do an in-person tour until the state allows us to. We're going to limit the times for in-person tours. And and we had people get annoyed with us, and we lost residents. In my mind, I definitely, I think I won in that from a long-term perspective because of the sheer volume of cases. So play the long game on all of this, right? And I think
Yeah.
same with how you're
It's-
communicating the clean air stories, which is what I assume is like reduction and turning the corner when it comes to a cluster
Yeah.
of cases. Say how it worked really well. I'm pretty open with families. Like, it's going to happen again. Here's what we're going to do, and here's why I think it'll go a little bit better. So.
Yeah, that's really good point. You're playing the long game because you've got a long-term business to build around in your community, for example, in your neighborhood, et cetera. And so you've got to have the right long-term game. It's not about just small victories. It's about how you're preparing for the long term. Hey, another question that I think Shar probably goes to you from Wendy. How are you dealing with memory care clients wearing their masks or shields and things like that? How are you dealing with the actual clients themselves? And same for you, Laura Lynn, from when your folks visit at home. Can you talk about a little bit about what you're doing for you from their point of view, not just your staff members?
My answer will be short. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not wearing them. It's impossible.
Really hard.
So social distance as best as we can. Those air filters I mentioned, humidifiers. We're just trying sort of any sort of passive way we could do it. They're not going to wear it. It leads to agitation. It leads to a lot of problems. But
Yeah.
so what you look at is what is it supposed to prevent? The 6 feet distance, the air particles, those sorts of things. Solve that problem. But they're not the problem, really. The individuals, it's our staff. So it's, I think, a minor issue for us at least.
And
Laura Lynn, same with you?
Yeah, for those so we do business, we provide support for those that fall below baseline within assisted living facilities, but also at home. And at the end of the day, if they're at home and they're not wearing their mask and anyone else in the family is not wearing their mask, then they're a risk to my caregiver. So I evaluate that case overall. If that person is home and they're in a bubble and they're not wearing their mask, and then our caregiver, I will do whatever I need to do to make my caregiver comfortable, including wearing full-blown PPE if they want.
Gotcha. Very cool. Hey guys, we're amazing conversation. I wish we could go a little longer, but we're running out of time. Kate, if you wouldn't mind, just real quick, our next webinar coming up, I think you're going to be leading that on the CARES Act. Can you just talk about that for just 20 seconds, and then we're going to have to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So Congress and generous taxpayers have given about $185 billion to healthcare providers under the Provider Relief Fund, under the CARES Act. And we're going to have a webinar on January 28th at 2 o'clock to discuss that. And also, Raj will do a quick demo on the Care Safely platform. But we're going to discuss how the CARES Act funds that were dispersed in 2020, but also now being dispersed even more under incentivization programs in 2021 can be used under the technology criteria to help infection control in these facilities in the new year.
Cool.
So hope you can join us.
Yes, absolutely. Shar, Laura Lynn, and Kate, thank you guys so much for joining us. Fabulous conversation. Really, really enjoyed it. And thank you so much for your insights and perspectives. Really appreciated it. Thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate all the hard work y'all are doing in the front lines. And safe and take care. Bye.
Thank you for joining us.